technically under the finance department, but I don't really live in one department. So more regularly, my job is to do the annual business planning. I'm not doing budgeting, but I'm doing annual goal setting. So I work across all the different departments. Our primary revenue driving functions, which is like sponsorship, suites, and box office ticket sales. So I work across all those to set the goals, make sure everybody's aligned, make sure everybody's speaking across the organization, making sure sponsorship is talking to tickets and tickets is talking to, to sponsorship. But on a more, unregular basis, like Craig mentioned, it's kind of some special project work. So I really take lead on different initiatives our organization has that don't really have a home within the organization, right? So that would include things like our mobile app, things like stadium renovations, which I've worked a lot with, different marketing initiatives. The gambling space and sports betting is a really new thing that we're navigating across the NFL, especially here because we're based in New Jersey, which was the first state to legalize sports betting. So I can dive more into those projects, especially if you guys have seen things around the NFL that have been, or around sports in general, if interested you, I'm happy to dive in. But that's really the best way I can describe it. So I really love my job because I come in every day without exactly knowing sometimes what I'm going to do. And it changes by the hour. I'll get calls from different people. They need help with different things. So I'm really in the space right now just to learn as much as I can about the industry and about our team. So yeah, hopefully that gives a little bit more context. So I'll dive into stadium renovations a bit. It's a little bit easier to wrap your head around. So like our stadium we built about 10 years ago. It's a bit unique. It's one of the only, it might actually be the only shared stadium left in the country. We share it with the Giants. It's in East Rutherford, New Jersey, which is just outside of New York City. And it's a very old school stadium. It's actually kind of the last like old school stadiums. It's a bowl with seats. Which if you see all the newest stadiums that are being built, especially in the NFL, the Falcons, the Rams and Chargers stadium they're building, there's a lot of different spaces, a lot of tech integrations, a lot of general gathering spaces. And really that was my big project when I first came to the Jets was how do we rebuild the stadium where we don't totally compromise seat capacity because we still want to sell tickets, right? But we have a little bit more interesting spaces. So what we've done is kind of ran a lot of analysis on undersold spaces, underutilized spaces in our stadium. And we wanted to create sponsorable stadium assets that are these giant gathering spaces. So if you come to MetLife next year, you'll see these giant areas we've built above the 100 level that are sponsored by Bud Light that create these like viewing areas of the field where you can stand there with a friend. Doesn't matter where that friend sits or where your seat is, and you can sit there and drink a beer and watch the game. So that's a big trend around sports. Baseball stadiums are really quick with that. If you go to a baseball stadium like the Marlins Stadium was really good with that. So that was really a big project that ownership had for us is how do we improve the stadium experience for especially a younger generation that likes to gather and not be confined to their specific seat. It really starts from the bottom up for us. It really starts with, okay, getting the task from ownership and really diving in deep to what makes the most sense. And then when we come up with our analytical or more, our more analytical approach to it, then it's kind of going through, like you said, it's going through our stadium ops and our facilities guys with the team first, making sure that they're comfortable. Okay, can we physically do this from a construction standpoint? And then it goes into the marketing perspective, which is this a good story to tell the fans? Which in this case, it was anything where we're offering fans, especially like in the 300, like our upper level, a chance to get down closer to the field. They felt like it was a good marketing initiative for us. And then it's going to sponsorship and saying, can you physically sell this? And at the time they had identified a need for somebody like Bud Light, who has a Anheuser-Busch in general, which has a huge deal with us at the stadium. Yeah, they're looking for more exposure and more seating areas near the field. So this makes a lot of sense. We can upsell them. We can get more revenue out of it. But then the tricky part about us, like I mentioned, is even after I get buy-in, even with Mr. Johnson, who's our owner, then we have to go to the Giants and get buy-in that they're willing to do it. And frankly, in this case, they were not willing to do it. They actually were not okay with doing like a full blowout of a stadium gathering space, that area. So what we actually had to do was kind of find a workaround where we like removed some temporary seating that could be put back for their games, but removed for our games. So it's really navigating, like the way I take my job is find the most analytical approach, adjust it as you go through the different departments as needed, compromise as needed, and then kind of find the ultimate solution that works for the Giants and the stadium staff. It really drives analytically our decisions in two ways. The way we use it is in two primary ways. One, we have a full, just to give a little bit of context, we have a full analytics team that is like in our CRM, our management tool, where we get all the data from every fan that we can. That includes fans that have bought from us before, fans that just engage with us on social media, fans that are just in the area that we buy from Ticketmaster, other large vendors. But one is ticket pricing. So in the case of the stadium renovations, back to that example, it's really understanding what is valued in the secondary marketplace, or not valued by just our own sales. Right? It's easy to go, okay, this section of the corner doesn't sell tickets very well. Like, it's hard for our sales guys to sell it. That's step one. But in a city like New York, where we do really well with ticket sales, even season ticket sales, this is actually selling under market value in the secondary market. Or it's selling way above market value for the secondary market. So we know that ticket is underpriced by us or it's overpriced by us. So then when we define those kind of that heat map in the stadium of what is a good section and a bad section, then in terms of the fan engagement, the fan experience, we're always managing data of our like fan profile, we call it. So we really like to understand our fans' game day, our fans' demographic, our fans' need and wants. So we know that we have a younger demographic that sits in a certain section, and we know that this younger demographic likes to hang out, instead of just sitting in a seat. Or we know they like to engage with us online, so we need to fulfill some of their needs in the stadium through the mobile app. Really what we're working on, we've worked on in the past and we continue to work on now, even during like this coronavirus times, gives us a lot of time to do this, is to really understand like the entire game day of our fan, not just when they get into the gate or even the tailgate at MetLife Stadium, but like this person wakes up and they go to 7-Eleven for coffee a lot. And not to say we're like creeping on your credit card or anything, but we like to know, well, this person engages with this sponsor a lot before game day. And we're going to sell 7-Eleven a partnership because we know that everybody goes to 7-Eleven for coffee before the games. So we're really intaking data from a million different sources. We have a giant database where we try to get as personalized as we can. And we utilize that data for sponsorship, like I said, sponsorship revenue and selling on a really good fan profile, but also, serving people offers at the right time. If we know that every time you leave the stadium, you go on Twitter and you comment about the game or you watch highlights about the game, that's where we're going to try to engage with you. So it's really just understanding as much as we can about the behavior of our fans. Coronavirus may or may not be kind of a blessing in disguise for the NFL, assuming that we can start the season on time with fans. But the reason I say that is I think the NFL is a bit behind in some of the digital engagement. At least for me personally, like I'm more drawn to the NFL or the NBA, or at least I was, because they are really good with highlights. Like it's really good on social media. They have some really good tech stuff. And I think the NFL was a little bit lacking in this, which is why our demographic, or at least the Jets demographic, tends to be a little older. So I think what you're really going to see the NFL do is how to develop the fan experience away from the stadium. So there's a lot of stuff with augmented reality, virtual reality. I think you're going to see that will supplement the broadcast experience. You're also going to see a lot of really interesting social engagement, kind of interesting content. Like for us, we have a player who plays like Madden on Twitch. We have him like streaming him playing himself on Madden on Twitch. So, what NASCAR is doing, which is really cool with the live races. That stuff is where I think you're going to see the league go, which I think is something that we needed to do anyways. And maybe coronavirus might just force our hand a little bit quicker than we would have. The analytical thing, I know it's kind of hitting it over the head, but that really is where we're going. And that's on both the football side and the business side. So If I think a big way to to differentiate yourself in the marketplace for jobs is if you can learn some of the basic coding. You don't have to be like a Silicon Valley level, Facebook develop level coder. But if you understand, at the very least, understanding how data can flow through like these APIs from the mobile app that we talk about, how we do the CRM, how the data inflows to our database. Even if you don't know how to code, which I personally, I'm not going to lie to you, I don't know how to code. I know a little bit of SQL, but I'm not in there doing Python all day. But I understand how the data flows. Those things are important. And if you can learn SQL, Python, R, those things are really helpful and oftentimes in a really competitive job marketplace, help you delineate yourself. I think, and again, like I said, on the football side, we're constantly managing data. So managing databases is a huge thing. And outside of data, it's a lot of the people skills. It's a lot of being able to manage different types of people in the organization. NFL teams are still really lean. We really have, we probably have 80 salespeople, and we probably have 40, non-sales front office people. If you are able to do a lot of things, that can be really valued in sports organization because they're only going to be able to hire so many people. So if you can help with marketing, but also help with sales and also help with data, those are all things they're looking for, is how to get the most out of every person that they hire. So as Craig kind of touched on, my path was a bit unique. I studied finance and statistics at UF, which is basically another word for I have no idea what I want to do, but I knew I could get a job out of it, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. So the Red Sox internship was really helpful for me. I had a connection there that I turned into an internship, and that really showed me. Like ticket price analytics is what I did, but most of what I did was like the typical intern stuff, which is tough. I was at the stadium 12 hours, 15 hours a day, showing tours, handling fans complaining about the fact that there's a pole in front of their seat at Fenway. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that's what the stadium is. But that internship really opened my eyes that I did want to work in sports. But after school, they came back to me and they really didn't have many openings. And I could have gone back as maybe a salesperson. I personally, that wasn't the path that I wanted to take. It's a path that a lot of people in the organization take, and it's a great path, but just wasn't the path I was ready for. So I went into consulting. And I think I mentioned to Craig, I think a common misconception in the sports industry, or at least in the school, is that you can only do sports if you want to be sports. There are plenty of jobs that are pathways to sports still. The things that I developed in consulting help me every day. Like I use them every single day at my job at the Jets. And it was a good kind of stepping stone for me. I also loved living in Chicago, and that was really helpful for me to prepare myself for New York. But I knew that I always wanted to work in sports. In terms of the question on the one location thing, I get you love your favorite team. Like you grew up a Jags fan. You're the biggest Jags fan in the world. I totally get that. I do recommend being a bit open. I think it's a lot easier if you're like willing to move. I had to move here. I wasn't like looking to go to New York. I definitely was not looking to go to the NFL. But when the right job is open, I feel like you got to take it. So I encourage professionals to be open. I've moved 3 times in the past 3 years, and it does suck. It's hard to make new friends. It's hard to be in a place where you don't know anybody, but it is an experience that forces you to kind of develop yourself. And I definitely kind of swear by that approach. We're doing anything we can to develop the next generation of fans. That's really the big goal for our community relations, for our youth football programs, for our digital content. So we really do understand that there's not always a bottom line to every business unit. In the business units where we do want to drive revenue, like I listed, of course we are going to do everything we can to drive revenue as best possible. But we really do believe in the power of football in the community sense. I think you're really seeing it in this COVID times. You're seeing football, sports in general, kind of bring people together. The draft was a big thing in bringing people together and providing people with something to enjoy during these tough times. But With the coronavirus or with the community relations, like I said, our big initiatives are anti-bullying, which is a big thing for us, which helps develop the youth football. And what we really do is it's instead of measuring on like a revenue perspective, it's more of how many people are we engaging, how much money are we raising, how many kids are we turning into full-time Jets fans. That's really what we try to gauge success by in those areas. I work with them all the time on sports betting stuff. The NFL is a mess on the sports betting stuff when it comes to what we can and can't do. It's extremely tricky. It's like a different language when I get the contracts that or the rules from the league. So I actually sit physically in the office when we are in the office, sit next to our head of, of counsel. So where I work with them is there's a lot of work to be done that's constantly changing on what we're allowed to do in terms of name and likeness or IP for sports betting. So for example, and this is really granular, but for example, when we signed a deal with MGM, we were the first team in the NFL to sign a gambling deal. A lot of that is because we're near New York City. More of that is because we're based in the first state that legalized sports betting. The initial league rules was like, you can partner with a casino, but for gambling casino reasons, not for sports betting reasons. So you could only partner with a company that brought, I think it was more than 50% of their revenue from non-sports betting. So somebody like FanDuel or DraftKings, that's all from sports betting, we couldn't do a partnership with. We could only do deals with like a casino. But besides the gambling stuff, when it comes to legal, we're always monitoring our sponsorship deals. There's a lot of very specific contracts with our partners on assets that we owe them, what that asset means. A lot of times it's very vague. Like we owe them a digital content series. The way they portray that and we portray that might be different. So there is a huge place in every sports organization for a person that not only can understand like the contract negotiations for the players, which is really interesting, but also the legal or the legal ramifications of sponsorship deals, exclusivities, IP rights, all those different things. So that's a really interesting place to be involved with, and a place where there's a lot of opportunity for employment. So there's a couple of different things that it impacts. One, it impacts our sponsorship deals in terms of what is in the stadium versus what isn't in the stadium. Our value on the TV and radio world doesn't really matter if there's fans or not. You could actually argue that TV and radio would be more valuable. But that's one planning is deciphering what sponsorship assets we would no longer have. Or better yet, would no longer have value, and then how we replace those, create new assets. Obviously, suites and tickets are kind of screwed. Like, to be frank, it would be really a tough world for the suites and box office. Our overall revenue would be really tough. And by the way, when it comes to COVID, suites is actually a lot more dangerous than box office, and there's a myriad of reasons why. Most of that is because there's a difference between Craig deciding I love the Gators and I'm going to go to a game with my family because that's a risk that I choose to take as a fan, versus Craig buying a suite for UF and kind of forcing other people to go as a client thing. From a company perspective, it's much bigger of a mess. So suites are actually a much bigger risk for coronavirus than box offices. But on the fan engagement side, like I mentioned, I think that augmented reality, so providing like next gen stats, real-time data while you're watching a game, like, oh, how fast is Le'Veon Bell running right now? Is he 15 miles an hour? How many tackles is he blocking? How quick is he shifting? Those data points are a really cool supplement to fans who are like diehard fans who watch the games. So I think there's gonna be a lot of development on the augmented reality, like watching the game through your phone screen and getting served live data. And then the virtual reality sense, what can we do? Can we put a GoPro on our quarterback's head? Can we put 360 cameras in the front row in different areas where a season ticket holder maybe has access to their seat? Like, I can watch the game from my seat just like I normally would in a 360 view. And maybe that's like a privilege we only give to season ticket holders to provide them value. So I really don't have a great answer for that yet. We're working on it. But those type of tech advancements, I think, are what we're really going to see. And I think from a fan engagement perspective, we will do it just as we always have. It'll just be through different vehicles. The big thing for when it comes to having no fans in stadium is just the suites and ticket sales. Everything else should be pretty safe. There's a lot of people I know who've done that. There's for instance, there's a guy in our analytics department who is building those fan profiles that I described earlier. He started out as a season ticket sales rep right out of college, literally cold calling people for season tickets, which, as you can imagine, in New York and specifically New Jersey, is quite the job, cold calling people. So there's a lot of opportunity. I think what it really comes down to, kind of what I touched on of like just developing skills, it's really the skills you develop, whether it's at the job itself or before you take the job or outside of the job. As long as you have the skills, you're always going to be set up for advancement in a different place if that's what you desire. If athlete development is a tough one, I don't work in that area. Just it's super competitive. Like our professional development guys are a lot of ex-players, a lot of ex-coaches. When it comes to like the analytics, the even like finance or marketing, other things, if you say, hey, I just saw this job posting for an analytics person, and I know how to do SQL, and I know how this data flows and those things. There would absolutely be opportunity for you, and they would much rather hire somebody who they know is a hard worker than somebody who's just off the street. So it really comes down to when it comes to advancing within a sports role at different places, it's getting that buy-in or that organizational or getting the connection within the organization first, and then, proving yourself in different ways through the different skills that you have. So that's really the way I would suggest it if you go that route. It's it's a really good question. I think that, but I think, like, for example, my first move to Chicago, there was not a very big alumni network there. I didn't really know a single person. I do have a significant other that's moved with me. That's helped a bit, but it's really just getting out there. I think you start with your work friends and you try to make as many connections as you can with, whether it's the UF connection there, your hometown connection, like other Floridians in my case, or it's meeting work friends and then branching out. I think I've been able to maintain my connections back in Chicago with my management consulting firm, knowing that I may or may not move again. But I think within the sport, within these big cities, it's a lot of just getting out there. It's a lot of finding hobbies that make sense for you. I play a lot of pickup basketball after work, just joining a basketball league. If you have a sport you like or another hobby you like or a book club or a political organization, whatever it is that you like, you can make friends in these big cities. I think a common misconception for people in Florida or where I was raised was like, oh, people are mean up there. They're never going to welcome you in. And I've actually, maybe some people are a little rough around the edges, but I've made so many friends in Boston and New York and Chicago that I wouldn't have made them otherwise. And I think that we're just very fortunate to be in a situation that is where we're in the 2020s and not 1980s where you have to send letters and stuff. You can make connections virtually. You can make connections at different, career networking events and there's a lot of opportunities out there in these big cities. You got to keep yourself developing. Like the biggest thing is to not get in a place where you feel stuck or feel in a place where you're not developing your skills anymore. There's a difference between I'm not working in sports and I'm stuck, or you can work in a different job that's not your desired job and still be developing things, right? So I found myself, even though I wasn't consulting, doing something I didn't necessarily enjoy, I was at least learning these skills that I knew I was going to apply later at something I enjoyed or another job, or it was going to help me advance myself. So even if your job doesn't offer, your initial job or whatever doesn't offer something that allows you to advance, so you don't feel like you're learning anything, then I would encourage people to really try to seek that outside of work. Do a course on course RA, like just get a certificate of something a skill you haven't learned before. As long as you keep learning, I think it helps you keep sane. But it is a real adjustment period, and it's just having a good circle around you, making as many friends as you can, and managing work-life balance, not working yourself to death early in your career, and just maintaining a healthy balance of life and work when you start work. I will say, like, one of the coolest things you can do if you do leave Florida, or even you're just like visiting on a weekend, go to like these Gator clubs outside of Florida. It's one of the coolest things to be like in downtown New York City, surrounded by 10 million people, and then be like, oh my God, I recognize that guy from like the Chick-fil-A at the Hub, my undergrad. Like, it's the craziest thing to see people who you like saw in undergrad randomly in a big city. It's like, did a really cool virtual draft party that was really successful. So it kind of had a bunch of different facets. One, we had our in-house reporters kind of live stream, run like a studio show from their homes for all 3 days. We included some interviews with some like old legends like Joe Namath and Nick Mangold coming on and talking to fans. But they were basically just like what we're doing right now on Zoom calls, but they just taped it and sent it out live stream on Instagram and Facebook. And we were able to work in partnership, like even just simple, like, visibility signage stuff on the Zoom, to like some interesting kind of branded pieces of like, what is the Verizon sleeper of the draft and stuff like that. We also did a draft predictive challenge, which a couple teams did something similar, where we had fans predict all 32 picks, and then the person with the most accurate picks got a suite to the first game, a free suite to the first game, really big prize. So that was really good. We had like thousands and thousands of fans sit down and spend like 30 minutes projecting these picks, which was really cool. So what we found was the fans obviously couldn't engage with us live. Maybe they had personal engagements, but they were engaging with us digitally a lot. We had really big numbers on our socials, really big numbers on our emails, really big numbers on our predictive games. So yeah, I think what we realized, I think I told you this, Craig, is it forced us to kind of consider, like, we always thought that the games itself were like the big, gambling asset, but we didn't even consider the draft, or we didn't even consider the mini camp and stuff like that. There are things that we can, or free agency, there are things that we have utilized this offseason that we would have never utilized, that now we're like, oh man, that's got some value. And moving forward, we're definitely going to keep doing draft predictive challenges. We're definitely going to continue doing some free agency stuff that maybe we didn't activate as much in the past. So it was a good experience for us, and we're very, very happy with how it turned out. So, like I said, SPJ is kind of the Bible of this stuff. They're the best at aggregating all of it. They have a podcast too, I think. The Athletic has some cool business focused stuff. I love The Athletic from both a fan and a business perspective. It's a really good product. And I think there's other career networking things. I know even in Florida, I've gotten some friends that have visited like some job fairs and stuff. It's always just connecting with people. LinkedIn, there's some really cool people to connect with. I recommend just, the other thing is, it's not just sports stuff, reading like The Economist and whatnot, understanding what's going on in industries across the world. Most good ideas in sports come from outside of sports. Even on the player development or player value side, all of that comes from financial stuff. Like times like this, where you're trying to understand sponsorship trends and seeing who's spending, which is a huge revenue driver for us. Who's spending, is a lot of that comes from trends in the general market. We know who's getting hurt the most. We know that United Airlines is not going to do a multi-million-dollar deal with us right now because they're not flying their planes. So those things are really helpful to know. So I encourage people to also stay up to date with the general, Economist, Wall Street Journal type stuff. My favorite thing about my job, besides the fact that I'm able to learn across all the different type of functions that we do, my favorite thing is the operational side. Like I said, I was in consulting, and if you're not aware of how that typically works, you spend hours and days and weeks and months like doing all this analytics, and then you present a recommendation, then you get paid and you leave. And a lot of times they wouldn't even listen to it. My favorite part about this job is the operational thing. Like, so I mentioned some of the gathering spaces we did. We had our first preseason game was against the Giants. We always play the Giants in the preseason, which is a mess because we have Jets fans, but we also have Giants fans there. And one of my most rewarding experience I've had since I've been at the Jets was we had this big Giants fan wearing a Giants jersey, and he's standing in this gathering space that only exists for Jets games. And he comes up to one of our consumer service guys, and he just goes, "I can't believe the Giants don't do this. This is the coolest thing ever." And I'm like, yes, that's exactly, that's what I live for, is not only seeing my work in action, but also seeing the fan response for it. Hearing fans, like when I was at Fenway, one of the most impactful things I did was actually read fan mail. The first week they locked us all the interns in a room, and they made us go through all the fan mail, and like learning how much these teams matter to people. And the fact that my fan gathering space on the field level, where some kid, some family with this 5-year-old son gets to shake hands with Sam Darnold, he's a fan for the rest of his life. I don't know if you guys have watched The Last Dance, but I watched Last Dance on Sunday night. Dennis Rodman gave his pair of shoes away to a fan. That person, I guarantee you, is the biggest 40-year-old Bulls fan on earth. So I love creating those connections that create lifelong fans for the team and actually make people feel better, especially during times like this.